I'm about to presume an intimacy and show you my lingerie. Those of a more sensitive disposition may wish to avert their gaze. Hello my lovelies, welcome to my little cottage by the sea, the place where I love to stitch and craft my way to a vintage inspired and sustainable lifestyle. In today's video I'm going to be sharing my 2023 sewing challenge with you, sewing vintage inspired lingerie for my handmade, thrifted and vintage outfits. It's long been on my mind that I need to sew some vintage inspired lingerie, and back in the day when I used to sew bridal dresses, I also used to sew boudoir lingerie that you can put on to take off, that I really enjoyed designing and sewing. I, being a plumptious woman, need rather a lot more underrigging, scaffolding and foundational support to make everything stay where I want it to stay and to work with more vintage style silhouettes. My boudoir lingerie wasn't lingerie that you could wear to run marathons or do any kind of sporting events, but it sure did look very pretty. And in the lingerie that I make, I would like to have lingerie that looks pretty but is also really supportive and functional. There is a lot of lovely lingerie out there. I've been doing loads of research and have collected lots of inspiration, but for my particular size and style there doesn't really seem to be an affordable option. I'm really looking forward to this sewing challenge, and I have some very specific things that I want to make. So I'm just gonna take you through some of my ideas, some of the inspiration and my little sketchbook that I'm gonna be compiling, working on as I work my way through these new lingerie pieces for my lingerie wardrobe. I spent a lovely time in Pinterest land on various vintage boards and my lingerie board, and picked out some of the things that were really resonating with me. I wanted to make specific things, but I also wanted coherent colours, so I've got this kind of blush pink and cream and black theme. Lots of very 1950s style silhouettes, I think. And I just love the colour of these roses, incidentally. This sort of pink is exactly what I'm wanting, maybe in satin. And I've also dived into my vintage books. This one, The Pictorial Guide to Modern Home Dressmaking from 1941, is an absolute treasure. And also this lovely little book, Pretty Pretties, the book of lingerie sewing secrets. I really hope I'm going to learn lots and lots of secrets in this sewing challenge. First up for my sewing challenge are slips, and this 1930s simplicity pattern that I've had is one that I'm going to be making. I'm going to have to resize it, so I'll be using my bespoke blocks that I drafted with my Patreon students and recreating probably both of these, but I also need lots of other slips as well, so I'm on the lookout for other versions. I'll be using some of these techniques, vintage authentic techniques, as shown in Pretty Pretties, and I love the idea of monogramming my lingerie, so I'm going to be looking for a T to monogram so that everybody knows that my underwear belongs to me. This also shows how to draft blocks and to make different types of slips, so I'm going to be replicating some of these If you'd like to see specific things, then do let me know. I can film and share with you, and you can sew some slips too for your vintage inspired wardrobe. I'm not going to be making a cami teddy type thing, but isn't this vintage girl just swoonsome? I turned my Myrtle Made doodle into a paper doll and drew out all the little pieces that I'm wanting to make. Here's the slip. I had great fun doing this, and look, she's got little boudoir slippers too. This is a bespoke corset made by my wonderful friend Miss Katie Corset, who's also a very talented painter. It really is an incredible work of art, and how fab is the little label. I'll link her website below so you can go and have a little look to see all her brilliant creations. I'm not necessarily going to be focusing on corsetry as such, but I do want some shapewear pieces in my lingerie wardrobe. I'm thinking particularly waist cinchers and more sort of waist shaping things, because I don't really have an hourglass figure in real life. A Merry Widow of some kind like this with detachable straps would be great. This book, by the way, Vintage Lingerie by Jill Salen, is brilliant. There's also one about corsets. Well worth a look if you're into vintage and vintage lingerie. I love this 1950s corselet. I tend to gravitate towards a more 1950s shape, late 40s, early 50s shape in the spring and summer, and then go back to the sort of late 30s and 40s for autumn and winter. I'm not entirely sure why. But how fabulous is this with its suspender straps for your stockings? I'm looking forward to making some kind of waist cincher. I think I'll be replicating this one as accurately as possible to wear under those more hourglass shapes. And here's some of the inspiration on my board, some waist cinchers, both vintage and modern. I'm really interested in using cording and quilting to help create structure in my shapewear and in my lingerie, much like they did in much earlier examples of corsetry in stays and so on, and using lots of those techniques. I love Italian quilting, or trapunto as it's known. Next up on my list of lingerie to sew are knickers, and I really love these French knickers, which actually are left over from my lingerie pieces from my bridal days, based off of 1930s pairs. I've got some pattern pictures in my little sketchbook. I love that they are buttoned up, and they're great in the summer under tea dresses. I'm going to be making a few more pairs of these out of repurposed silk from my wedding dress samples, which I still have lying around somewhere. I am definitely going to monogram them, like I've done a little doodle here on Myrtle May, and they can be worn with vintage style bras, which I will also be making. How wonderful are these ones with this lace inset and pin tucks and all sorts of gorgeousness. I'm going to be trying out this, putting in lace insertions. I've not really sat down and given it a go, but the pictorial dressmaking guide shows you how everything you could possibly need to beautify all of your lingerie. These ones I made, and there is a video which I'll pop up here too, from Oh Lulu. They're really lovely. I really enjoyed sewing them, but the sizing isn't incredibly generous. So I have actually already recut this pattern to my own measurements. Here are my versions of the same sort of burlesque pant concept. Much more comfortable and rather saucy because they're completely see-through on the derriere, but sometimes You've just got to be saucy. These knickers here, or lingerie, do pardonnez-moi for using the word knickers, are also from my boudoir range. These are the Venus knickers. Really love these, and this colour silk is exactly what I'm wanting. They're ever so comfortable, but I have a bit of a tummy pooch, so they're a little bit low rise for me. I may try to update them, but that kind of pant could end up looking more like bloomers. A real necessity for my new vintage inspired lingerie wardrobe will be bras. I love these cathedral style bras that were all over the place in the 1950s. Here's some of my design ideas. I'd like to have something long line and strapless, but also maybe with no underwire, all sorts of versions really. I find bras incredibly difficult to find out in the shops and online, wherever it is one buys a brassiere these days. I've got very strong ideas about what I want. I think that this is going to probably be the most challenging bit of this sewing challenge for me, because there's a lot of engineering and structure in bras to make them work, especially if you have significant boobage like I do. I'm not saying that I want to play tennis in my bra, but I definitely want to feel supported and comfortable in the lingerie that I'm wearing. I really love this style bra that I've drawn for Myrtle May. For some reason, I haven't drawn the straps long enough on this particular drawing, but you get the idea. Maybe with some quilting on the cups of the bra, and I love this idea of black lace over cream. This is a sort of idea copy inspired by the Dolce & Gabbana bra. This is a suspender waspy that I made for my boudoir range. I've taken the lacing out and I need to work on this a little bit because the boning in it doesn't really work. So I'm going to take that apart and update the concept. And meanwhile, I'm going to be referring to the colour palette on my lingerie inspiration board, and I really love this suspender belt. I do need a couple of suspender belts so that I can actually wear stockings that I have that I can't wear because they fall down and I look more Nora Batty than Dita Von Teese, and I'd much rather look like the latter, to be honest. I may find the time to make a luxury nightgown or two and maybe some loungewear, but my priority is to make these particular pieces of lingerie, vintage inspired lingerie, that are beautifully fitting and hand finished with lots of techniques that I haven't tried before, or I've tried but not really perfected. I want to use as much repurposed fabric from my wedding dress days and my stash as possible, and I want to make things that are really, really pretty and work beautifully under my vintage inspired pieces and really make me feel like the ultimate femme fatale. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about my ideas for my 2023 sewing challenge, sewing vintage inspired lingerie collection. I'm really excited to get going. If you have any resources or recommendations that you think are going to be helpful and inspiring for me and my lingerie project, then do pop them in the comments below, because it's always really useful to get your feedback. Thank you so much for spending time with me today in my little cottage by the sea. And I'm really looking forward to sharing all these projects with you over the coming months. This isn't something that I'm going to be doing this week. It's a long-term project, and hopefully I'll tick off all the pieces that I've mentioned today. Hope that you will check back in and see how I'm doing. If you haven't already subscribed, then I'd absolutely love it if you did, and then I will be sharing all of these sewing adventures with you, and all the support you can give me by liking, subscribing, whatever it is that you can do, I'm ever so grateful for. I hope that wherever you are in the world, my lovelies, you're keeping very safe and well, and I'll see you very soon for some more sewing adventures. Bye, my lovelies.